Hey guys, it's Ninja coming at you with another YouTube video and ESO commentary, and today we're going to be talking about dueling and kind of what it means in this patch especially, and in ESO in general. Does it take skill? Does it mean a whole lot relative to the actual players playing? And the answer is a sort of yes and no. I know a lot of YouTubers have already made commentary videos on this, and I don't mean to beat the dead horse, but I feel like the topic is fairly relevant even now in Somerset. Because player skill obviously does play a role in dueling. You can't just not have thumbs and expect to win, but really this patch, especially with some of the builds that are available, it's kind of true. ESO is a build-based game, first and foremost. It plays kind of like rock, paper, scissors, and if you have the right gear on, the right setup, you're going to win a duel against certain players and their setups, and that's just how it goes. And you see here, I do end up losing this duel because I have to spend a lot of time just blocking and healing a lot, because obviously if you can't tell and you don't know too much about this patch, I'm defiled the entire time, and there it is, slowed on me for the whole time. And this is a player, and this is nothing bad to this player. I'm not trying to be toxic or do anything like that. He's beat me every time we fought this patch. He's always got slows and a defile heavy armor build on. But this is a player who really didn't beat me a whole lot last patch, and this isn't, once again, this isn't me trying to say he's a bad player or anything, he's a fantastic player. But last patch especially, for as long as we've been fighting, when I first started getting into the dueling scene and such, he took a couple off of me, and then once I learned how to duel properly and play the game and got my classes down, it wasn't even really a question. He wasn't winning any fights last patch against me. And once again, I'm not trying to say he's a bad player, not trying to say I'm so much better than him, because once again, dueling isn't really all that skill based. But now this patch he's thrown on this specific build and he's winning almost every fight he comes across because he's a good player using a really strong build. The next fights I'm going to show you are against Despotic. I'm sure some of you already know him, and this is an open world fight. And so, the point of showing you guys the last clip was just to say, builds play a much larger role than actual player skill in duels, especially this patch, with some of the ways that you can build. And there's and ESO is a latent game. You have to play around the lag. So this is what these clips are going to be kind of trying to demonstrate with Despotic. I'm using an uppercut warden build. He's using an open world, his wizard's build, but I win this set 3-0, and this isn't me saying Despotic's a bad player, this isn't me exposing Despotic, because we're both lagging like crazy. Our abilities aren't going off, swap cancel ability just doesn't come out, he gets CC'd, he's laying on the ground for like 30 straight seconds, I get CC'd, I'm on the ground for like 30 straight seconds, so we're both playing under like heavy stress because of the lag. And that's another reason duels aren't as meaningful as they could be, because this game, it just lags so much. The latency means that your abilities aren't it's not necessarily accurate. If you think about a fighting game, which is entirely skill based for the most part, one of the biggest things is having as little screen delay as possible, having pure reactions and pure responsiveness. If your pad is messed up and you're having input errors constantly in a fighting game, you need to go switch your pad, you need to go fix your setup, because that's going to be a huge issue. And those input errors are built into the game with how the servers are, especially this patch. So the combination of sets and certain classes countering each other. Look at this latency. Look at that latency, sets and certain classes countering each other, and then having the latency, having moves not come out when you need them to, not being able to CC break. Those are all things that are so important in a duel, and they really handicap your ability to display your skill at the game in a duel. In general, ESO isn't really a hugely skill-based game. That's not to say that there aren't good players and bad players, because there certainly are. Despotic, you can see King Games over there. Those are considerably good players, above average players who are better than most players. But even still, when you put that in the context of a laggy game system, of a game system with unbalanced builds and such, and they're trying to balance around PvE content, they're trying to balance around open world content. And this is a group play game. When it comes to PvP content, it's meant to be played in large groups. So dueling is kind of overlooked. The dueling meta is completely different from what the open world meta is. I think the best example of that would be the Magicka Nightblade and the Magicka DK, especially from previous patches. The Magicka Nightblade was considered the best dueling class in the game prior to this patch dropping, and still can be, seen as that. In context, we have the Magicka Sorcerer now, which might be a little bit stronger depending on who you're talking to and such. But the Magicka Nightblade was really strong in dueling scenarios, but when you put it in the context of open world, it wasn't. It actually struggled a lot, and it still does, but this meta kind of can succeed depending on how you're playing it. So essentially, my point is the game isn't balanced around dueling. It's heavily unbalanced in duels. There's crazy sets you can run. If you're playing up against a Magicka Sorcerer or a Magicka Nightblade, or any class that relies on shields for survivability, you can throw on Shield Breaker and guarantee that you win the fight. If you lose a fight against a Magicka player with Shield Breaker that's relying on shields for healing, you're not playing it properly, and that's one set. You put on one piece of gear and you're guaranteed to win the fight. So we have even worse sets like Slodes' patch, which is crazy pressure, and in duels it's not too bad, but when combined with a high damage output class and constant defile, it's almost impossible to win that fight. And you see, once again, he dies there because of the latency. It's just pretty bad. So what I'm saying essentially is don't take duels too seriously. Don't feel like if you're losing duels this patch, it's the end of the world. Obviously, you have to look at what you're doing wrong in those situations. And I've always been a player that when I lose a fight, if I mess up in a 1vx situation, if I lose a 1v1, I like to try and bolster that responsibility, not say it was the game, just put that on me. Be like, I could have played better there. And I'm certainly new to Warden. I haven't been playing the class for a very long time. I'm sure any veteran Wardens can kind of tell. So with those fights like against Prove It, I'm sure if I was playing a little bit better, I definitely could have won. But these players are at such a significant advantage simply because of the fact that they have these sets, because of the fact that they can combine these to really boost their performance. So dueling isn't largely skill-based, it's largely based on your luck with the servers and what sets you have on, what class you're playing. But that doesn't mean that it's not fun. That doesn't mean that it's completely meaningless and no duels matter and you should just be a toxic cheese ball, who says you're garbage can if you win a duel, Just don't take duels too seriously is essentially what I'm trying to say. Players really like to get into them and get really upset when they lose duels or talk shit or say that they're exposing other players when they win certain fights or what have you, and it's none of that. I think actually this is a very good combination of clips I've used here, because I lose in the fight against Prove It and I win in the fight against Despotic when I have an uppercut Warden build. I had the same sets on in the fight against Prove It, but I was using different skills because this is my open world build and that was my quote unquote dueling setup. I just changed 2 skills because I'm too lazy to go sword and board main DPS. But Despotic is. I'm not trying to say that these players who's good, who's bad, or anything like that. But he's significantly more well known in the community for good reason. He's a good player. He's OG Stamina Nightblade. He knows the class, and I would say that Despotic has shown that he is more talented at the Nightblade than somebody like Prove It. And once again, that's not to say that Prove It's a bad player. I think he's a fantastic player. He's a wonderful duelist. He's played a lot of different classes. But Despotic, this has kind of been his class, and he's a great player, and he doesn't win one of these fights, whereas Prove It, who is arguably lesser well-known, look at that, Despotic couldn't even CC pick there. What lesser well-known, not quite as skilled at the class, won every single fight against me. So I think that kind of shows you the stark contrast in what skill does for you in a duel and what your sets and what the latency does. And yeah, that should be about it. This is, just really quickly, this isn't to take anything away from these players. The fights to both Prove It and Despotic were great fights to both of them. They're both fantastic players. And I'm not trying to say, Prove It's a garbage can who's carried by Slodes or anything super toxic like that, because he's not. He's a really good player. He's a talented duelist. I've seen him around a lot. and he does that, and I don't want to take those wins away from him, because he definitely deserved those wins. He played better regardless of what he was wearing, and he took the fight. He took the wins. So, you know, I think it really is on the player to try to adapt to what's being ran in the patch. And like I said before, you know, if I was playing better, I perhaps could have won those fights for sure. And that's what you got to look at. So if you're losing fights to players like Prove It or whoever, and they're using slows and they're using those sets, don't blame them. Zos put it in the game. You got to try to adapt to it, and just, even if you maybe not could have won the fight, look at what you could have done better, because there's always something you can personally improve on from a fight. Even if it's lagging, even if they're using slows. I see this mentality with a lot of players, this defeatist mentality, this non-improvement mentality, where players will say, oh, it was lagging, or oh, he was using slows, so therefore I did everything right and I lost. You know, and that's not true. It's a false dichotomy. It's not either the two are not mutually exclusive. It's not either you're doing something incorrectly or it's lagging. You can be doing something incorrectly while it's lagging, while they're using slows. So even if you are losing these fights, even if it is super latent, you know, look at what you could have done to do better. Even when you win, think about the things that you can do to improve if you want to try and get better at the game. So yeah, shout out to Despotic and Prove It, great fights. Both of the players are fantastic players, regardless of, you know, what circumstances the fights happened. And in general, just don't take duels super seriously. You know, I would suggest not trying to get super tilted or salty about them, because at the end of the day, it is a game. You're trying to have fun. They're just duels. You know, I feel like the only real test of how good a player is 1vx solo play, how they can handle a situation when they have multiple players fighting them. But even then, it's a little dicey, because there's a lot of variables that go into a 1vx. So yeah, maybe that's a video for another time. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope maybe you guys have opinions. What do you guys think about dueling in ESO? Do you think it's skill based? Do you think it's not? How do you feel about how the sets and the classes and bounce are impacting dueling in this current patch, in this meta? And, you know, any other thoughts or opinions or ideas, I'd love to hear them in the comments section. I definitely will be getting back to those. Subscribe if you want to see more content, like if you liked, don't if you didn't, and yeah, that's about it. Peace, guys.
Yo, DJ, put a nigga back to the record, baby, and give me this right now.